Imagine you followed every rule, kept every law, being more faithful than anyone around you, and that faithfulness is exactly what gets you killed. For centuries, Israel's theology ran on a simple equation: obey God and prosper, disobey and suffer. The Babylonian exile, Israel sinned. The fall of the northern kingdom, Israel sinned. The framework held. But in the 160s BCE, faithful Jews were being executed precisely because they refused to abandon their God. The old equation shattered. The book of Daniel is the emergency repair, and its solution changed everything that came after, including Christianity itself. To understand Daniel's radical answer, we need to understand the book itself. It's really two books in one. Chapters 1 through 6 are heroic fiction, likely composed in the late 3rd century BCE. These are the famous stories: Daniel interpreting dreams at the Babylonian court, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, Daniel in the lion's den. They model one lesson: you can live under foreign rule, but never compromise on God's laws. Scholars recognize these as later compositions, not eyewitness reports. The text calls Belshazzar the king of Babylon. He wasn't. It references a Darius the Mede who conquered Babylon. No such person existed. These errors reveal stories written centuries after the events they describe. Chapters 7 through 12 are entirely different. Apocalyptic visions composed during a specific crisis in the 160s BCE. Same book, different genre, different century, and a far more dangerous purpose. Chapter 2 gives us the code key. King Nebuchadnezzar dreams of a massive statue made of different metals. Daniel interprets: the gold head represents Babylon, the silver torso and arms represent Media, the bronze belly and thighs represent Persia, the iron legs represent Macedonian Greece under Alexander, and the feet, a fragile mix of iron and clay, represent the divided kingdoms after Alexander, Ptolemaic Egypt and Seleucid Syria. Then a stone cut without human hands strikes the feet and shatters the entire statue. That stone is God's kingdom, destined to replace every human empire. This is Daniel's essential technique: real political history encoded as prophetic dream. The author isn't predicting the future, he's encoding the past. He already knows these empires rose and fell. The sequence makes a theological claim: God controls history, and every empire has an expiration date. Those crumbling iron and clay feet point directly to the crisis that generated chapters 7 through 12. In 200 BCE, the Seleucid Empire seized Palestine from the Ptolemies. By 175, a new Seleucid king took power, Antiochus IV, who gave himself the title Epiphanes, meaning God manifest. Antiochus launched a campaign to forcibly Hellenize Judea. He banned Torah observance, outlawed circumcision and Sabbath keeping, and made possession of Jewish scripture a capital offense. In 167 BCE, he committed the ultimate sacrilege: a pagan altar, likely dedicated to Zeus, erected inside the Jerusalem temple. Jewish sources call this the abomination of desolation. Jews who resisted were tortured and killed. This is the specific datable outrage that the second half of Daniel addresses. The statue gave us the code key. Now chapters 7 through 12 turn up the intensity. The metals become monsters. Chapter 7 retells the same march of empires as monstrous beasts: a lion, a bear, a four-headed winged leopard, and a terrifying fourth beast, an ogre with iron teeth. That ogre sprouts a little horn that speaks boastfully, changes sacred laws, and makes war on God's faithful people. The little horn is Antiochus Epiphanes. The author can't name him directly. He writes under active persecution, so he uses the tools of apocalyptic literature, a genre that reveals hidden divine plans through symbolic visions, coded language, and angelic mediators. The visions are attributed to Daniel, a figure from centuries earlier, in this pseudonymous authorship, writing under an ancient name, was a standard genre convention, providing both safety from the persecutor and authority from the tradition. Chapter 7 doesn't end with the beasts. The vision shifts upward to a cosmic courtroom. An Ancient of Days, God depicted as a white-robed, white-haired figure on a fiery chariot throne, opens the books of judgment. The beasts are stripped of power. Then one like a son of man, a human-shaped figure amid all these animals, approaches the throne and receives everlasting dominion. In Daniel's original context, Son of Man probably designates an angelic figure, perhaps Michael, representing God's people. The phrase elsewhere in Hebrew simply means mortal, right? Here it means something more, a heavenly being who replaces bestial tyranny with God's eternal kingdom. Early Christians later applied this title to Jesus, transforming its meaning profoundly. Daniel's author also reinterpreted older scripture with apocalyptic urgency. Jeremiah had predicted 70 years of desolation for Jerusalem, roughly the period of the Babylonian exile. Daniel chapter 9 transforms those 70 years into 70 weeks of years, 70 times 7, equaling 490 years. This stretches Jeremiah's timeline from the 6th century BCE all the way to the 160s, landing precisely on Antiochus's persecution. The message: we are living in the final week of history. God's intervention is imminent. Hold on. This is classic apocalyptic posture, reinterpreting older prophecy to declare that the present moment is history's climax. Now we reach Daniel's most revolutionary claim. Chapter 12 declares, "Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting contempt." This is the only passage in the entire Hebrew Bible that clearly affirms individual resurrection after death. It emerged here for a specific reason. The old theological framework held that faithfulness brings reward and sin brings punishment. That equation explained the Babylonian exile. Israel sinned, so God punished. It explained the fall of Samaria, but it could not explain the 160s. Jews were being tortured and killed precisely because they kept God's laws. The faithful weren't being punished. They were being martyred. The old framework broke. Resurrection is the theological emergency exit. If God's justice can't be fulfilled in this life, because the righteous are dying for their righteousness, then God's justice must extend beyond death. The martyrs will rise, the persecutors will face judgment. This idea, born from the blood of real people in a real crisis, will prove one of the most consequential in human history. Daniel's innovations didn't stay in the 2nd century BCE. The apocalyptic worldview, history as determined drama, present suffering as birth pangs, imminent divine intervention, became foundational to early Christianity. Jesus adopted Son of Man as his primary self-designation. Paul built his theology of resurrection directly on Daniel's framework. 1 Corinthians 15 is unthinkable without Daniel 12. The book of Revelation borrowed Daniel's bestiary wholesale: beasts, horns, thrones, numerology. Through Christianity, these ideas born from a specific persecution reshaped Western civilization's understanding of death, justice, and the future. Daniel's authors faced a theological emergency. The most faithful were dying for their faith, and no framework could explain it. Their solution, that God's justice extends beyond the grave, was born not from abstract philosophy, but from the blood of martyrs. It remains one of the most consequential ideas in human history.